Namaste everyone and welcome to another session on Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Today we will research chapter 3 verse 40 and 41. It is said that the senses, cognition, intellect are its abode. It envelops the wisdom of the embodied and deludes. Therefore, control your senses when stimuli comes and effectively overcome this wretched destroyer of knowledge and self and surrounding. What is Sri Krishna trying to say?
Embodied. The embodied is us. And this Brahman manifests itself through the senses for jivas because we don't know how jadams react. Jadams are basically insentient, like stones and cars and things like that. But that is basically what we've been discussing so far. That whenever you have these material things in our midst, we begin to get attached because the senses drive the need to possess. And how does that function? We have got five senses: the eyes, ears, nose, taste, and touch. Stimulus comes to us in the form of these stimuli, and they then get uh, collated by the manas. The manas also includes memory. The intellect compares all the data that is brought in by the senses and memory and compares it with conditioning. Conditioning is what we have been conditioned to something from the minute we are born. Our parents condition us to behave in a particular manner. Schools condition us to say this is right and that is wrong. Governments put in a constitution. So we are conditioned from childhood to live in a particular manner. Like, for instance, in India, you will drive on the left hand side of the road. You will walk in a particular manner. You will speak certain languages. In Tamil Nadu, you will speak Tamil. In Maharashtra, you will speak Marathi, and things like that. So the conditioning happens as a form of how society is driven. So it starts from the, let's take from the macro aspect. India, in Bharat, we have the constitution. The constitution is very specific about what the center will do, what the states will do, how laws are made, and things like that. These determine how a citizen will function in a society. Within each state, there are specific rules. These rules then determine how a child is born, how a child's name is registered, what is a birth certificate, how a child will then get an identity in terms of the state. That dharma is given by the state. When the child is born, the first person that the child sees is the mother. The mother then teaches the child. These are non-verbal communication. The child knows only how to cry, sleep, perform basic body functions, and to eat. Other than that, the child cannot do anything. It's helpless. It is the mother who nourishes the child, mostly non-verbal communication of affection, security, and this is driven by what is called the Maslow's hierarchy: safety, security, society. Then we have self-actualization, and things like that. So each of these, by stroking the child, by holding the child for many weeks, many months, the mother gives the child a cocoon of security. Then the child begins to realize that I have a father. The father is also becoming a part of the child's life. Then the child goes to school, begins to interact with a larger community, all the time within that dharma of the state. So, what is happening is that a conditioning is happening on the child. This conditioning determines what the child will consider as right and wrong, good and bad. That is called the dharma. This dharma is then applied on all decision making. Whenever change comes to any of us, that is the change, that is the template, the datum on which we compare all incoming stimuli. So the incoming stimuli coming through our senses, then we have memory. The cognitive aspect is comparison of the memory. The buddhi compares the memory and the incoming sensual information with dharma. And then, depending on our fragility of our sense of self worth, some of us will be very strong within the self. We are deeply rooted within ourselves. We will not react quickly. Some of us get easily agitated. It can also happen that some of us will have a cold, and that will impact our decision making capability. When we are having a fever or a cold, even the best of information will not make us happy because we are miserable inside. Some of us will be getting very sad information, but because we're deeply entrenched within the self, we will not get agitated. So there are many aspects on which decision making becomes either a good decision or a bad decision. Some of us will react badly to some information and will be like rock solid in other areas. Some of us will have emotional intelligence, some of us will be intellectually strong, some of us will be physically capable. So all of this combines to form our dharma, and we react based on the stimuli that comes to us. And this is what Sri Krishna is saying, that this particular aspect, the senses, cognition, intellect are its abode. Brahman operates in this area, but it is not driven by it. It operates there. It does not. It is the owner of the action, but it does not own the action. It drives the action, but it does not own the outcome. And because it envelops us, we get caught up by this reality that we see, and we are unable to recognize that this particular action is temporary, and so we need to transcend it. So what Sri Krishna says is therefore control your senses when stimuli comes and effectively overcome this wretched destroyer of knowledge of the self and its surrounding. So how do we control the cognition? Control of the cognition is done in a very simple manner. The first primary stimulus is the sense of smell, and the sense of smell is driven by air, prana. So the air goes in through the nostril, and somewhere in between the intersection are two glands. First is the amygdala, and the second is the pineal gland. The amygdala is the primary source of us who live in the world right now. When the input comes into our senses, we also have eyes, we are also hearing. These are the primary inputs. If the muscle memory or the amygdala is not configured to this particular input that comes in, the first thing that happens is our awareness goes up to see whether there is a threat coming from the incoming source of knowledge. When that perception of threat is not there, then there is stability. But if the perception of threat is high, then what happens is that we begin to react. And that is when we have raga dvesha. We either get closer or further away from the source of knowledge, source of the disturbance or source of stimulation. And so what he is saying is that if you can control this particular way in which the data comes in, or when the data comes in, then you are in a better place, because then what happens is that the impact of artha, kama, and dharma on you reduces. Now, how do you do that? First is, let us say, the breathing. When you breathe in a manner where your breath is not agitated, it is calm and it is equal. You are not, your breath is not fluctuating. The first thing that happens is that the olfactory receptors, which are there inside the nasal cavity, they will stop. Um, they will stop getting agitated, and they will send a very the message of calmness to the amygdala. When the amygdala receives a message of calmness, it will not react. Similarly, if in your eyes, if you look at something and if you look at it in a manner without desire, I want this. When you look at it like it is an object, then what happens? The need to possess something diminishes. Similarly, if you listen to something, if that agitates you, sound can agitate you physically also. So because when you're when you're going in the street, when you have a lot of people honking, automatically you become agitated. If you can reduce that and get calm. So the three primary sources of knowledge begin to calm down because taste is only when you eat. Touch also is important, but most of the time, touch and taste are recessed. Our primary inputs come from hearing, smell, and eyes. So if you keep that slowly under control, then the artha and kama path begin to get under control. When that happens, the amygdala does not send any signals to the adrenaline glands. When the adrenaline glands do not get any input, they do not flush your system with adrenaline or cortisol, and you do not then become ready to fight or run away. When you do not become ready to run away or ready to confront something, then what happens is that you are in a state of peace. When you become conditioned to remaining in that state of peace, slowly all your senses become aware of what is happening without becoming engaged in it. So you are becoming slowly like an observer and not a participant. When you are not participating but observing and acting when you really need to act without actually getting involved in the action, then what happens is that your cognition and other things settle down and slowly you begin to transcend dharma. And then thereafter, you are in a position to understand that which is enveloped, that which envelops the wisdom, which is the Brahman.
Let us recap what we have covered so far. We get stimuli through the five senses: the sense of sight, touch, hearing, taste, and smell. Of these, smell, sight, and hearing are primary, and we depend on it more for immediate stimulation. The data that we get goes into the manas, or the center of cognition, where all this information is collated along with our memory. And this information is compared with our conditioning or dharma by the buddhi. When there is congruence, we bring the we bring the entity closer to us, and when there is no congruence, we try to push the entity away, thus causing karma. Ahankara is the sense of doership, that I am the doer, and this flows. This is the base on which dharma also operates. Once we have decided what our stimulus is going to be, or the response is going to be, we respond through our motor organs such as hands, legs, tongue, etc. All the components of the sensory system are inert, such as in the indriyas, the various sensories, the sensory senses which receive as well as the system that we use to respond. The chitta or the consciousness, the manas or the cognitive system, and the buddhi are inert. They operate on inherent capability which we have from birth, but they degrade with age. Dharma or our conditioning or value system is learned, and ahankara, the sense of doership, I exist and I do something, provides the ownership for any activity. Through all this, the consciousness is the carrier of experience and is common for all the stages. Some examples of dharma. At a higher level, the earth, the dharma of the earth is to sustain life. The dharma of the sky is to protect the earth. Language, the dharma of language is to communicate, to help in communication. Governments, the dharma of governments is to govern by the constitution. The dharma of a school is to make citizens responsible by providing education. Parents, secure and nourish. This is their dharma. So we can see that dharma means the natural state, that which makes every entity resolute, strong, steadfast, which comes from the root word dhr in Sanskrit, is dharma. So that which makes us resolute and confident and stable within ourselves is our dharma. This often manifests as conditioning in individuals. How does dharma work? We are like computers. Our configuration comes from our parents' DNA. Then our parents load our operating system. That is the base operating system on which we will live throughout our life. Then we go to school where our teachers teach us various languages. So, for example, if the operating system is, say, Windows, then on top of that we'll put Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc. And that is done in school. Whereas our friends will then teach us how to use those programs, as well as give us small programs or applications which we will then use throughout our lives. So these applications will come and go, but the operating system will not change. So then afterwards, when we grow, we become integrated into society in the form of a network. So we get networked into society and become part of society. So all this drives us to living in a particular manner. For as long as we operate in those conditions, we are stable and at peace. When we are removed from that environment, or when the conditions change, our self-worth gets challenged and we become uncomfortable as well as anxious. The natural state which allows us to be at peace, the settings as well as ourselves, is our dharma. So what happens when a stimulus comes to us? First, we see the stimulus and we hear. Like I said, there is the smell, the sight and hearing. These three are the primary things which give us that kind of immediate stimuli. When we see a snake, that immediately tells us, because of our memory, that a snake is a dangerous creature. So this information goes to the amygdala, which then immediately bypasses all reaction systems and allows us to, it triggers what is called a fight or flight stimulus. So the amygdala sends this impulse to the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus sends the information through the pituitary to the sympathetic nervous system, which ends at the adrenaline glands. The adrenaline glands release catecholamines as well as adrenaline into the bloodstream, which allows us to react immediately and either run away or get ready to face the attack. So what has happened when the data has come in? If the data is congruent with what we think is right, we pull something closer to us, and if it is not what we wanted it to be, we push it further away. But in both cases, whether it is liking or disliking, there is an action of pushing and pulling the person away. This pushing and pulling of the person or the entity away from ourselves is called karma, which in Sanskritam means action. Thank you. Do like, share, and subscribe. For more information, please do visit my site www.schoolofyoga.in.